Okay, good evening, Rabbi. Tonight we're going to discuss a very important topic. And the reason why we're going to discuss this topic is because we had some conversations with some friends of ours. You remember that some people were here also, and they had all kinds of questions about this topic, practical questions, because it's very much a part of our life, this issue. So what are we talking about? We're talking about when you go to parties, you go to a wedding, go to a bar mitzvah, you go to a brit milah or some other kind of wedding, or some other kind of party, or whether it's a birthday party, whatever it may be, right? All these kinds of things. So the question is, in these public events, number one, are you allowed to do mixed dancing, right? Number one, men and women dancing together. Number two, also the question comes up regarding mixed seating as well. Are you allowed to have men and women sitting together? So, in order to understand this, right, we have to go back into the sources and understand what we can glean from there, right? To get us a start. So, where does it start from? This whole thing. There's a Gemara in Masechet Sukkah, Nun Bet Amud Aleph. There's also in Masechet Sukkah a different place that talks about this as well, and I'll explain to you how that works. So, Nun Bet Amud Aleph says something interesting, right? And also an interesting story brought down there as well. There is one of the prophets, right, Zechariah, that talks about over there, about the war of Gog and Magog, what's going to be over there. We talked about this before, right? So one of the interesting things that talks about over there, the war of Gog and Magog, is that there's going to be some kind of a funeral, that's going to be held after the war is over or something like that, right? So what are we talking about, right? Doesn't really describe very well what the funeral is about. Like what's going on there, and then the prophet. It's a Perek Yud Bet over there in Zechariah. So, but the Gemara over there, the Gemara describes it very, very well what's going on. So there's two different versions of the story over there, right? The Gemara says, what is this funeral talking about? So one version says, one opinion says the Gemara is talking about the funeral of Mashiach ben Yosef, right? What does that mean? He's supposed to die, this guy, right? So. We already discussed this in the past, why this guy's supposed to die. So, the point is like this, right? That Mashiach ben Yosef is the one who's going to fight the wars against the enemies, go out against the enemies of the Jewish people and conquer them and subjugate them, so forth and so on. So he's the Mashiach that makes the wars against the enemies of the Jews. So what's going to be is that in the final war that they're going to fight, the battle, whatever, which is like Gog and Magog, like something like that, what's going to be is, right, according to one version of the story, this is the version that we're talking about here, there's going to come some guy called Armilus, which is like a Roman guy, like some, European guy, Armilus that's what he's called in the text. So this Armilus guy will come and kill Mashiach ben Yosef, right? So what's the idea behind this? That once Mashiach ben Yosef dies, then the Mashiach ben David will come and take, center stage and take over from there. That's the idea. So Mashiach ben Yosef, according to this, is just a temporary stage of salvation, It's not the final stage. Final stage is Mashiach ben David. That's what it is, right? According to this version. So, in order to understand a little bit better, we can mention about what it says in the Zohar Kadosh, right? It says in the Zohar Kadosh that Mashiach ben Yosef really, right, his soul goes back all the way to Yosef HaTzadik, But Yosef HaTzadik had some bad people that came from him, a bad line of people. What are we talking about? We're talking about the kings in the first temple, right? There were some sinners over there that came from Yosef HaTzadik. The biggest sinner, the most famous one, right, is, he wasn't the biggest, but very famous. We're talking about Yerovam ben Nevat, right? He's the one who started all the problems. He seceded from the union, from the country of Shlomo Melech and his son Rechavam. So what happened was that they made a new kingdom in the north. There was a southern kingdom, northern kingdom. We talked about this before. So what happened was that Yerovam ben Nevat took the people to idolatry. He took 10 tribes. He left 2 tribes in the south. 2 tribes in the south stayed together, Binyamin and Yehuda. But the northern tribes, they went to 10 tribes with him. He turned them into idolatry. He made them into idolaters. Blah blah blah. He took them away from Hashem. Took them away from the Torah. Yerovam ben Nevat. So comes the Zohar Kadosh, right, and says that Mashiach ben Yosef comes from him. Something interesting, right? Comes from this sinner. That's what it is, right? So the truth is that the Mefarshim over there, the commentaries, they say that what are we talking about? That it comes from him. We're talking about that he's a Gilgul of him. What does that mean? That Mashiach ben Yosef is a Gilgul, is a reincarnation of Yerovam ben Nevat. So what does that mean? Now comes Mashiach ben Yosef and he has to rectify what Yerovam ben Nevat destroyed, right? He mutilated, he decimated everything. What does that mean? He took the Malchut, he took the kingdom away from the kingdom of David. He made it into a separate kingdom for himself. He divided the kingdom. So he stole away the kingdom from David, which is a very big sin to do, because we already said, right, that we want Malchut ben David more than the other kingdoms, because they're more humble and so forth and so on. There's all kinds of reasons why that is. So comes this guy and steals the Malchut, steals the kingdom from Mashiach, from the Davidic dynasty. So now, in order to rectify the sin that he did, he has to bring back the Malchut, the kingdom, and give it back to David, the descendants of David. Who is that? Mashiach ben David. That's what we're talking about, right? So this is the whole process. So he's coming back, Yerovam ben Nevat is coming back as Mashiach ben Yosef, in order to rectify the sins that he did in his former lifetime. This is what it's talking about, according to Zohar Kadosh. Very powerful, very interesting stuff. So according to this, right, now the theme is more familiar, right? What does that mean? That since Yerovam ben Nevat was a big sinner and he caused the Jewish people to sin, so therefore he has to come back, do the job that he had to do to rectify his sins, but not only that, he has to die also. Why is that? Because he has to rectify the sin of all the sins that he did. The only way he can rectify that is by dying, by being killed in the war by some Roman guy, some European guy, by the enemies of the Jews. So there's a whole discussion over there in the Gemara, over there in Masechet Sukkah regarding this. There's also another opinion which says that no, this funeral is not talking about Mashiach ben Yosef. It's talking about the funeral of the Yetzer Hara. What does that mean? The Satan, the Yetzer Hara, will be destroyed. And the funeral will be about that. Whatever that means, right? Very esoteric concept to understand a little bit. But anyway, the point is, right, that according to that opinion, Mashiach ben David is not going to be the funeral there. So according to that opinion, apparently he's not going to die. He doesn't have to die. So the truth is that there's two opinions, the Gemara, as we said, right? But the Zohar Kadosh says something interesting, just to make a point about that. It says Zohar Kadosh that in the end, the program was in the beginning like this, right? Mashiach ben Yosef was supposed to die because of the sins that he did, as Yerovam ben Nevat. But the program was changed, right? Was altered, was shifted. How was the program shifted? So says Zohar Kadosh, what happened was that Moshe Rabbeinu, he knew with Ruach HaKodesh, with divine inspiration, prophecy, that Mashiach ben Yosef is supposed to die. So he was very disturbed by that. Disturbed. Right? So that bothered him, whatever. That obviously bothered him. Now the question is, why did it really bother him so much? What does he have to lose? So the answer is that he is a part of that. What does that mean? As we already mentioned, right? Really, the Mashiach is Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is Mashiach. So then if Moshe Rabbeinu is Mashiach, how do you have Mashiach ben Yosef? How do you have Mashiach ben David? How do you have all these things? How does that work, right? So the answer is like this, that says Zohar Kadosh, in a different place, that Moshe Rabbeinu was really Mashiach. It's true. So then what about David, Yosef? What is that? So it says in Zohar Kadosh, it's really one big neshama, right? The right hand of Moshe Rabbeinu is Mashiach ben David, and the left hand of Moshe Rabbeinu is Mashiach ben Yosef. The right, by the way, in Torah, in Torah literature, in Torah writings, the right side signifies like kindness, a more gentle approach. The left side signifies more judgment, So Mashiach ben Yosef is judgment. What does that mean? He's going to go out and fight the wars against the enemies of the Jews. This is the judgment side more. Mashiach ben David, who's signified by the right side, is more kindness. He's going to teach the Jews Torah. He's going to teach them morality. He's going to teach them to go in the good ways. Not only the Jews, the whole world in general as well. All the Goyim, all the nations as well. So okay, that's very nice, beautiful. That's all beautiful. So the point is, right, that according to Zohar Kadosh, Mashiach ben Yosef doesn't really have to die. So that fits in according to the second opinion of the Gemara that we mentioned. That says that funeral is not Mashiach ben Yosef. That funeral is for who? for the Yetzer Hara, for the Satan. What does that mean? That once Mashiach comes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu won't have any more use for the Satan anymore, for the Yetzer Hara, right? For the Vatican, it's the same one group, right? It's one project working together. So because of that, since he doesn't have any use for it anymore, the Satan will be destroyed. He'll be wiped out, and the Vatican will also go with it because they're, that's the upper Satan, that's the lower Satan. You know what I mean? They work together. So that's the way it is, right? Okay, very good, very nice. These things are already, pretty much well known and well covered in the in the Jewish literature, the Torah literature. Okay, very good, beautiful. So, but what does it have to do with us? What we're talking about here about going to parties and sitting together, men and women dancing together. What does that have to do with it? So it says something over there interesting in the Gemara, that the prophet, as we said, right, in Zechariah Yud Bet, he describes over there the funeral, how it's going to be held. So what does it say? It's going to be men separate and women separate, right? Always like that. Several families it mentions over there, each family, but always the men and women are separate. So it says the Gemara, you learn from here a very strong lesson, a very strong halakha. What's a strong halakha that you learn? You learn that men and women have to be separate in public events, public occasions. So it gives you over there kal v'chomer, a kol sheken. What does that mean? All the more so. If you have to be separate during a funeral, like we're talking about in that prophet, even though funerals are a sad occasion and really like there's no Yetzer Hara over there so much. In other words, people are not thinking about, getting over, things like this, right? They're not thinking about that at funerals. There, it's more a somber situation. I hope Jefferson's listening, right? So, it's more of a somber situation. So, the Yetzer Hara is not so strong, when you're sad like that. You know what I mean? You got something else on your mind. You're preoccupied. That's what it is, right? So, okay, very good. So, says the Gemara, nevertheless, even though it's a funeral and people are preoccupied with sadness, there's no place over there for Yetzer Hara so much. Also, another thing, which is that we're talking about the times of Mashiach, where the Yetzer Hara is already going to be destroyed. So there's not much of Yetzer Hara left anymore. You know what I mean? It's almost gone. So, still, nevertheless, the men and women have to be separate. Men and women have to be separate. Can you imagine? Even though those two things are different than what we have today. So it says the Gemara, all the more so in our times, where we're talking about happy occasions, we're talking about occasions where it's not a funeral, we're talking about parties more, and also we're talking about the Yetzer Hara is very strong. It hasn't been eradicated yet, like in times of Mashiach. All the more so, we have to have men and women separately. That's what it says in the Gemara. So it's a very powerful deduction, with this. Also, there's another Gemara over there, another source in Masechet Sukkah. Earlier, it's like Daf Vav, Daf V'Hei. It says over there also another thing, which is that when they used to do on a Chag of Sukkot, in the holiday of Sukkot, they used to do something called Mitzvat Bet HaShoeva. Right? Simchat Bet HaShoeva. What does that mean, Simchat Bet HaShoeva? On Sukkot, every night there was a party going on there, We're not talking about Yom Tov, Kaidre, we're talking about Chol HaMoed. On Chol HaMoed, every night party. This party was something special, So where did they do this party, right? Not Royal Palace, Elite Palace, whatever, Glenards or Great Neck, right? Not over there. They did it in the Bet HaMikdash, in the holiest place in the world. On the Temple Mount, where it's very, very holy over there. It's so holy, we can't even go up there today. We have no right to go there. So you can imagine how holy that is. And comes, and we're doing a party over there. Party. Yeah, but it says in Gemara that party, where was it, by the way, held? It was in the courtyard of the Bet HaMikdash, which is a very holy place. Ezrat Nashim, the women's section. But where was the women in that party? They were also part of the party. But the women were where? They made a special place for them, right? A balcony, like to stand upstairs. Like how they have in the synagogue. That's what they did. So what does that mean? They were separate again, right? The men were separate, the women were separate. So here again, you learn the same thing. That what? That in the old days, this was the halakha, and until this day, nothing has changed. What does that mean? That men and women in public events have to be separate. And also, there's a kol sheken also here as well. What does that mean? that in that party, right? Where was it held? In the Bet Hamikdash, the holiest place in the world. And nevertheless, so the Yetzer Hara is not so strong over there. You know what I mean? You're like, you're shivering from the presence of God there. The Yetzer Hara is not so strong. Nevertheless, men and women had to be separate. All the more so, right? Us, we're going to these, these sleazy, halls, these dirty places, and partying over there. All the more so, we have to be careful over there where the Yetzer Hara is very strong. It's not a holy place. So these are the two sources that we find in Gemara that talk about this issue. So it's very, it's very well documented in the Talmud that what. Now, what I want to explain to you is like this, right? There's two topics we're talking about tonight. One is talking about mixed dancing, and one is talking about mixed seating. It's not really the same thing. What does that mean? The prohibition of mixed dancing is more severe. Why is it more severe? Because over there you're touching also, you're hugging each other, kissing, all kinds of stuff, this and the disco, blah, 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 cha-cha, blah, blah, blah. That's it. You're touching each other. It's coming to touching also. And also coming to bad thoughts as well, that's for sure, right? But the point is, right, that since we have the element of touching over there as well, and bad thoughts and Yetzer Hara, when you're dancing together, especially when they're not dressed modestly, like today, they come dressed like, what? I don't want to tell you, right? The P word, they come like that. Right? They dress like, street girls. Excuse my language. That's how they come. So you're going to be dancing with a woman like that. So that's a very big prohibition because you're touching the woman, which is a very big sin. According to Rambam, this sin is very, very big to touch a woman. It's from the Torah. Right? Very, very, very big problem. So what does that mean? That dancing is very, very severe. So therefore, if you go and you dance, together, men and women together at a party, you're transgressing a big prohibition, like we described. But beyond that, there's also a prohibition of sitting together as well, being together in one place, right? Just like we mentioned from these Gemarot, right? From these Gemarot, these Gemarot prove that there's also a prohibition of sitting together as well, being together in one room together. Because we're not, at a funeral they're not dancing over there. Excuse me, but they're not dancing at a funeral. So even though they were not dancing, nevertheless, the men had to be separate and the women had to be separate. That's what it is, So you see from there very clearly, right, that not only mixed dancing is a problem, mixed sitting is also a problem according to our Torah, according to our halakha, according to our tradition, which comes from the prophet, from the Navi, this is Divrei Kabbalah, right? So it's something very very powerful. So therefore, right, the halacha is be'emet, also brought down in the Rambam Shulchan Aruch as well. What does that mean? It says in the Rambam Shulchan Aruch same thing, which is also a concept, which comes from here. What does it say over there? It says in the Rambam Shulchan Aruch, the laws of the festivals over there, right? In both places. It says over there something interesting, right? That when they're doing festivals, when they have holidays, Sukkot, Shavuot, or Pesach, they have to send out officers, the rabbis, police officers. This was one of their jobs. They have to send out police officers, right? Today, they send them out police officers to give tickets, double parking, right? All these kinds of things to make revenue for the police department, all kinds of stuff. But in those days, that wasn't the reason why they were sending them out, to give tickets. They were sending them out to what? To break up the parties. What does that mean? It says in the Rambam, it says in the Shulchan Aruch, they have to go out, the police officers, and anywhere where you see, right, congregating together, men and women, making a party, drinking together, eating together, making a party, making some kind of event, you got to break it up, Hey, let's go, break it up. Go home. Send them home, Just like they used to do for COVID, you remember, They used to get together people, they would come and break them up, arrest somebody, this and that, right? This was the way it was done. Why is that? Because says the Rambam, when men and women are together in one place, they may come to sin. Eating, drinking together, having a good time together, But the truth is that we're even in the Gemara we're talking about a funeral even. So even at a funeral they have to be separate. I'm not even talking about now parties, with drinking and all kinds of stuff like that. So what do you see from there? Very, very clear, right? That also from the Gemara, also from the Rambam, also from the Shulchan Aruch, that not only mixed dancing is a problem, which is because you're touching and there's a lot of bad thoughts going on there, but also the issue of sitting together, being together in one room is also a problem. Having an event together is also a problem. They have to be separate. This is the way it is, right? It says the Rambam over there, by the way, Shulchan Aruch, another thing, which is that it doesn't really matter where this event is going on, this party, whatever, whether it's outside in the field, or where it's at the beach, or in the orchards, or at some Flushing Meadow Park, or God knows where, right? Wherever it may be, it has to be broken up. The party it has to be broken up. So that's what they used to do in the old days, If they saw it together, men and women together at one party, I'm not talking about dancing. I'm just talking about being together. They used to break them up. The cops used to come and break them up. So according to this, right? You see very clearly that it is prohibited to have mixed seating together at these events, right? Whether it's a party, whether it's a wedding, whatever it may be, right? Doesn't really
I remember
make a difference. Yeah.
you used to call Leonard's orgies.
Okay. I don't remember that, but your memory is better than mine. But anyway, right? You get the point. You get the idea. So this is why, unfortunately, I had this issue, with a friend of mine that has a brother, and his brother is not really so religious, whatever it turns out. So he's asking me, can I go to the wedding, somehow, some way, to go to the wedding of my brother. So I said, listen, if there's going to be mixed, it's going to be mixed there, dancing, sitting together. So I told him, I said, if it's going to be like that, there's one thing you can do. Just go say Mazal Tov, and leave.
Oh, you can't. If you're not with a woman, you can't sit.
You shouldn't stay there.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? So I told him, I said, go, say Mazal Tov, and leave. What can you do, Pay your respects and leave. So then he started to ask me questions, we started getting into a whole discussion, blah, blah, blah. So I said, look, I have to be honest with you, really the truth is that when I told you just to go and say Mazal Tov, then that's a big discount what I gave you. Why? Because according to the Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, you're supposed to go take officers over there, police officers, and break them up,
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine you would do that? You bring officers over there, right? For COVID, they would do it. Right? But they're not going to do it because of halakha, right?
No.
Okay. But anyway, the point is, right, that according to halakha, this is the way it has to be. So we got into a big discussion about this, But what I see is that, they're all telling me, the people, that there are a lot of rabbis, some rabbis, who are allowing them to sit together, mixed together, in one group. They say, okay, don't dance together, but you can sit together and mixed. And this is not true, right? As we mentioned, I'm not talking now about Hasidut, about doing more than halakha. I'm talking about bare bones halakha. According to the Talmud that we mentioned, from Masechet Sukkah, Nun Bet, and also the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam, laws of festivals, very clearly it's delineated in all these places that you're not allowed to be together in any shape, way, or form. Doesn't matter whether you're dancing together, doesn't matter what you're doing together. Because as long as you're together in one group, the Yetzer Hara is going to bring something wrong there, right? Something's going to happen. That's the idea, So we see from there very clearly, right, that the rabbis, and then what I told this guy was like this, I told him, I said, listen, he told me, oh, this is a big rabbi, he's a big rabbi, he's got a big name, Av Bet Din. He said, oh, he's Av Bet Din. So I said, today, a person could be Av Bet Din and Am Aretz also, doesn't know halakha. So I said, you know what, this big Av Bet Din that you mentioned, let him bring a source, for what he's saying. Does he have a source? So, we just went back and forth, and he had no source. The truth is...
He's making his own halakha.
Yeah, exactly. He's making up his own halakha, going against the Gemara, going against Shulchan Aruch, going against the Rambam. He never saw any of these things. You know what I mean? And there's also other sources, by the way, that talk about this, There's also the Sefer Hasidim. It says over there, the Sefer Hasidim, that a person also has to be very careful about that, dancing together at parties, how they come to touch, and it's considered to be a very, very big sin, and so forth, so on. And there's also Sdei Chemed, which Sdei Chemed says, one of the big Sephardi poskim, he says over there, even if you don't dance with them, the fact that they're dancing and you're watching them, this also is it's gonna right, it's gonna damage you, right? Yeah, watching it is also very, very damaging to the soul, definitely decimates the soul pretty badly, And also there's another thing which damages the soul, the fact that they're sitting together, and congregating together, and being together, and the women are not modestly dressed, you know what I mean? They come like street girls, as we said, right? That makes it even worse, by the way, which wasn't At the time of the Bet HaMikdash, it wasn't like that. Nevertheless, even though they were all dressed modest, the women, they still had to be separate. All the more so today, when the women are so badly dressed, so poorly dressed, they come in, showing their bodies and showing this and showing that, right? And they have no modesty, like they scream, yell, you're hearing them, watching them, and this. It becomes like you're decimating your soul like that, damaging the soul very badly, you see this kind of thing, in front of you. It causes a big yetzara, a big problem, So the truth is that what I want to say is like this, right? That it's very clear from all these sources that it's not allowed to, whether you're sitting together, you're standing together, whether you're dancing together, which is even worse, as we said, because you're coming to touch and all kinds of bad thoughts as well. Right? In any constellation, this kind of thing is not allowed. For any event, men and women have to be separate, no matter whether it's a funeral, whether it's a wedding, whether it's a brit milah, whether it's a family function, whatever it may be, right? The women and the men have to be separate. That's the way it is. That's the only way to do it. So, he told me, yeah, but, this rabbi, he said, so what he told me, right? He says, the rabbi allowed me to go, sit in the hallway, outside the hall, in the lobby over there, and not go inside the ulam, the hallway, the wedding hall, So I was telling him, listen, it's not allowed either, because also over there, the atmosphere is there as well. What does that mean? They're sitting together, men and women talking, lounging around, drinking together, having martinis and cocktails, all kinds of stuff. It's not sanua. They're not dressed sanua. They're not behaving sanua. They're not behaving in a modest way. So for sure, even being in the hallway over there, some outside room or whatever, you're still a part of it. So no matter how you bring it up, it doesn't work. So I told him, I said, you know what, this rabbi who told you that it's allowed, tell him to bring me some sources, So it turned out in the end he had no sources. He had nothing. He had zero, right? Oh, big talk, just big talker. Yeah, well, we thought, you thought, but did you look in the Gemara? Did you look in the Shulchan Aruch? Did you look in the Rambam? Did you look in the Poskim? Where did you look? Where were you looking when you do this? So the truth is, I must tell you that I probably told you this before, but I wanted to reiterate this again. Maran, our rabbi, he wasn't a fanatic, when it comes to halakha. What does that mean? He always taught us to be as lenient as possible, on the community. Don't be too stringent with them. He said that the community, in this generation cannot take stringencies. It's too harsh for them, too difficult. So therefore, he was saying always, be lenient as much as possible in the community. Whatever the halakha allows, according to the parameters of the halakha, go as lenient as possible, according to the poskim, according to what's written. But in a case like this, where you're just you're totally decimating all the sources, and just transgressing everything, and you're being totally mindless of the sources, and going exactly the opposite of what they're telling you. Then by the way, this guy, he found some kind of a Rabbi Avigdor Miller, who was one of the great rabbis, the last generation, Ashkenazi rabbis of America. So he also, had a tape about this, that they taped him, speaking about this. They didn't have the original tape, but they transcribed the tape, whatever. But the point was that he exactly said, Rabbi Avigdor Miller, exactly what I told the guy. He told them, he used to tell people like this, go before the wedding starts, say Mazal Tov, and when they start the wedding, run out and leave. That's what he used to tell them. That's exactly what I told the guy myself, So pretty much, even though Rabbi Avigdor Miller was not really a posek so much, but he was a very learned man. He was a Talmid Chacham. He knew what he was talking about. So nevertheless, right, whatever it was, pretty much what he said is exactly what I said, more or less. What does that mean? I told the guy, I said, go and say Mazal Tov and leave. So he told me, but you know what it is, right? What he really wanted, what his desire was to go for the smorgasbord, so he can pig out, over there and eat all the fancy foods. He wants to go over there. But the smorgasbord, the buffet that they do, it's already men and women together, mixed together. So that's already too late. You're going there in a constellation like that. It's also not allowed, because you're not allowed to be sitting together, mixed together in one room. That's the idea. There has to be separation between the men and women. That's the idea. So this is the bottom line. So the bottom line, halakha, the real halakha, according to the Shulchan Aruch, according to the Rambam, according to the Gemara, The halacha is mixed seating or mixed dancing is strictly forbidden according to halacha, and no rabbi can come today and say it's allowed to do that, because going against the Shulchan Aruch, going against the Rambam, going against the Talmud. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen, amen. Chazak Baruch. Thanks for coming.
Okay.
God bless you. Be blessed with wealth, health, and happiness.
Amen.
Did I finish early?
Yeah, it's only 10 o'clock.
Discuss a very important topic.